I'm really thrilled about this one today. Thom and Raphaela are, I was going to say old friends, but they're not that old, but we're longtime friends. And they're just, I have so much admiration for all that they do. And they're so, not just accomplished in creating a couple of, really major festivals, but they have an understanding, I think, of the documentary scene because of their positions, unlike few in the industry. So I thought we would spend some time talking about festivals because, on the D-Word, there's a lot of talk of festivals and a lot of complaints about festivals because we're seeing it from the filmmaker perspective. I thought this is a rare opportunity to talk to folks who created one of the major documentary festivals in the world from scratch and to see what went into, the origin story of that and how they went about it. And really, what is it about, that filmmakers don't understand about running a film festival from the perspective of those who run it? So we'll spend some time on that, and then we'll spend some time on the documentary field and what's the trends that are going on there now in general. So welcome, Thom and Raphaela. I think people know what you've created because it was your little bios were in the emails that we sent out, but we'll probably focus mostly on DOC NYC because you are the co-founders, and it is America's largest documentary film festival. Is it North America's too, or is it just?
We can take North America because of hot docs one day, but not yet. So we're just America for now.
Curses. Okay. Also, you guys have a very interesting origin story of meeting because you met partly through the D-Word, which is, you mentioned you wouldn't mind talking about Raphaela.
Sure. I'm happy to. So I was looking up today, I was like, when did I join the D-Word? And I joined back in March of 2007. And my history is I actually came to festivals from a filmmaker perspective. So in 2007, I'd produced a documentary called Miss Gulag with a fellow D-Word member, Maria Yatskova then, now Ibrahimova. And we would look to D-Word basically as new filmmakers for anything we could glean about documentary. And when we were in Berlin, Maria was riding in an elevator at midnight with Thom, and forgive the phone that's ringing. It never rings except when I'm on a live Zoom. And anyways, she was in an elevator with Thom, and we were so new. And he said, "Are you here for the festival?" She said, "Yes." She said, "What do you do?" He said, "I program documentaries for Toronto," thinking she was an actress and this would be uninteresting. And she said, "Are you Thom Powers?" And he was the first nice festival documentary person we'd ever met. So anyways, through Maria and through D-Word, we kind of went through the journey of creating our very first documentary back in 2007. Then we came back to New York. Several months later, Thom and I were dating, living together, and the rest followed: the festivals, the podcasts, everything else. So,
I always knew that D-Word should have a matchmaking topic, and that's where we'd make our money. But that's just revisionist history. So you, at that point, when you started DOC NYC, Thom, you were already at programming the documentary programmer at Toronto International Film Festival. Were you also doing Miami at that point?
No. So my sequence of programming was I started the Stranger Than Fiction series at IFC Center in 2005, got hired by Toronto in 2006, started DOC NYC in 2010 with Raphaela, started at Miami in 2011, and then Raphaela and I created the Montclair Film Festival in 2012 with a great group of people. So that's the order.
What year did you start sleeping?
Well, hopefully that, I mean, I've just stepped aside as artistic director of DOC NYC. I will remain very closely involved with the festival as director of special projects. But you know, perhaps sleep will be some part of my future.
All right. So let's talk about, you know, people go like, you know, oh, wouldn't it be fun to run a film festival? You know, it seems like a very, you know, interesting, fun thing to do. What
and
exactly...
other people say, wouldn't it be fun to make a documentary?
Yes. Or Charles
both
Foster
are equally fallacious.
Yes. Wouldn't it be fun to run a newspaper? Where did you get the idea to do this? I mean, what gave you the, you know, ambition? Was it just seeing a need to have a real, you know, a major documentary festival? And then once you decided, like, what steps did you take to get this off the ground?
So, you know, oh, you want to go, Thom, or you want me to go?
Well, I guess I would just, I'd back up a beat, and then Raphaela, you can kind of take it from like 2009. But in 2005, when I started Stranger Than Fiction, I was coming out of 10 years of making documentaries. I made films for HBO and PBS and other outlets. And I was feeling a little burned out there, and kind of asking myself, well, what are the parts I like about this process? What are the parts I don't like about this process? And the thing I liked the most was showing my film to an audience. And I started to think about ways in which I could spend more energy there. Also, in 2005, I knew, you know, quite a few filmmakers who were dying to have their film in the theater. It was, you know, 2005 was a very different time than now in terms of being able to get your film to an audience or your film to a theater. I mean, around that time, I knew of a lot of filmmakers who would even show at a big festival like Sundance or Toronto or South by Southwest, and if they weren't, you know, one of those small fraction of filmmakers who had the fairy tale story of selling to a big distributor at one of those festivals, you know, they would come back home from the festival and be in a position of, you know, okay, well, now what? You know, I showed at this big festival, but you know, afterwards, it's easy to lose momentum for your film. And often what I would see a lot of those filmmakers do is go and rent a New York City theater so that they could, you know, bring together another set of tastemakers and try to keep momentum going for their film. In 2005, IFC Center had just opened, and John Banco, its general manager, was someone I knew from his previous role at Cowboy Booking, a small boutique distributor. And I approached John in summer of 2005 and asked him if I could do a series at IFC Center. And he thought that was great. I mean, I think I was benefiting from the energy of a new movie theater, and John was, you know, kind of willing to try new things. And my proposal to him, well, I actually remember, Doug, I came to you and I said, what would be a good day of the week to do this? And you said, well, Monday nights are when, what was it? What was the kind of work in progress screening series that was happening then? It was called Docu Club.
Docu Club, yeah.
Docu Club used to happen on Monday nights, maybe once a month. And so I decided to stay off Monday nights, and I picked Tuesday night as a night to hold Stranger Than Fiction. And John Banco liked that idea because Tuesday nights are an otherwise kind of slow night at the movie theater. So if I could bring in a new audience, then that was good for the movie theater, because otherwise they'd, you know, be selling to a relatively small audience, whatever their first run picture was that week. And, you know, instead of making someone, pay to rent a theater, I could give them a modest honorarium, put money in their pocket. So that's kind of that was some of the driving force of how Stranger Than Fiction started. And it, as I think got mentioned in the chat, the very first Stranger Than Fiction was 51 Birch Street, just a week or two after its premiere at the Toronto Film Festival. And, and it was very much in keeping with that spirit. Here, 51 Birch Street was going to premiere at the Toronto Film Festival, but, Doug had a huge community in New York that was dying to see this film. It would be, cruel for Doug to have to rent a screening room in New York. But so here I could give him a good screening and give him a little honorarium. And I remember thinking that if the theater was half full, I would consider it a big success. But it turned out to sell out in advance, and there, people were shut away, including a woman I was trying to date at the time. This is just an aside. Didn't work out. And it was that fall we continued to have great crowds, and John Vanko could see that this was something that was really working. So Raphael, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so that was 2007, and I had been a management consultant, and I had met Thom, and I said, why do I need the successful job that gives me a steady paycheck every 2 weeks? No, let's leave that all behind, and let's run a documentary series in the city. So we ran Stranger Than Fiction from 2007 onwards, and in 2009, it dawned on us that there wasn't at that time, I know there had been some predecessor attempts and other festivals before our time, but at that moment, there wasn't one that was really just dedicated to the very broad documentary storytelling. And we thought we would step in and really fill that gap. And with a very small team, I think there were 5 people in the first year. We were in the basement of the IFC Center. We really just got it off the ground, and it's grown ever since.
I would just add to that we have to give credit to the role of John Vanko, because it was, it was John at the IFC Center who came to us and said, I think you should do this. And honestly, my first reaction was, no, I'm too busy. I do the Toronto Film Festival, I do this weekly series, and I'm too busy to think about running a film festival. Mind you, we didn't even have a kid then. But I somehow thought I was too busy. And so John, knew how to press my buttons and said, okay, well, I'll get someone else to do it. And then we thought, whoa, hang on. And so that's a key part of how that got going.
And I guess one other thing to highlight is DOC NYC got approved as a concept when we had a 2-week-old baby. So we have a human baby and a festival baby that are both the same age and both approaching their bar mitzvah year this year. But they were, and actually when I was pregnant, 8 months pregnant, Doug, I saw the kids grow up. So I could already see the next 20 years. I remember I was full of hormonal emotions watching your movie, but I remember that too.
Yeah, that could leave you in fetal position for sure.
Yeah.
So what, let's talk about the growth. How did you grow it? I mean, how did you go about getting corporate sponsors on board? Was that the key element to it? What was your what was your pitch to them, basically?
So, I'll say we aren't a nonprofit, so we have to pay every single person who's with us at the festival. So the only ways we can make money are through sponsorships or through box office. And we were lucky. I think A&E was the first person where all we did was tell them our concept. And I think they believed enough in us that they came on board as our very first sponsor. And there were a couple of these small sponsors from year one, but every year we were able to demonstrate something that we had grown. So something that had felt perhaps abstract before we pulled a festival off the ground. became more tangible for sponsors. So, you know, one of the things I'm very proud of is of our partners, I think 90% of them come back year over year because they feel invested in the community, in the festival, in the timing, and all the different elements. And we've been able to continue growing the festival, incubating new programs that often don't have sponsors. And we hope if we build it, someone will support it. And that's been the way, I have to knock on wood, that many of our little projects have gotten off the ground. But it's really been like that. And I think mostly credit Thom's ambition with the rapid speed with which it's grown as the person who needs to build everything. It's sometimes crushed me, quite honestly. But, you know, it's really when it all comes together in the fall, then the pain is worth it for all the buildup that takes us to get there.
I mean, I will say that there is a pattern in Raphael and I working together that she's the one who makes these things happen, and I'm the one who's kind of dragging us in a direction and saying, hey, we could do this, by which I mean, you know, Raphael, you could make this happen, and I'll keep dreaming up these new things for us to do. But
I'll say, like, in terms of the pace of accelerated growth, by the fourth year, we were already the largest documentary festival in the country. So it wasn't that it took us till year 9, like that was already year 4. So it's really been an exponential growth in terms of one year to the next, in terms of everything, the staff and the programs and everything.
Was that sort of a goal from the beginning to be the largest? I mean, some might say, you know, why not have a smaller, more heavily curated thing like, you know, the New York Film Festival, say, you know, of documentary. That would have been another.
I think, I mean, that is that's always a question worth asking about, you know, what you're trying to be. And I think that, you know, for any of us who have been to lots of different festivals, big festivals and small festivals, you know, we know that there's different virtues in both. I mean, the exciting thing about a big festival is there's, you know, so much going on and it's such a high concentration of people. And, you know, a virtue to a small festival is that you can kind of be, you know, without that high concentration of people, you can kind of be more relaxed. You know, you can have, you know, sometimes like longer interactions with the people that you are talking to. In the case of DOC NYC, it felt natural to grow because I could see, you know, how many films were out there looking for a platform. And, you know, I mean, we, even at our current size, you know, showing over 100 features, you know, every year there's, you know, dozens of films that we don't have a place for that, you know, that I know would have an audience. So there are trade-offs to being a large festival, but you know, but I think that the benefit is that we're trying to build a platform to take on as many films as possible.
Sure. So let me bring up some questions that I think, you know, have been batted around on the D-Word over the years that I know filmmakers are curious about. I mean, let's talk a bit about the curation. I mean, at the beginning, were you mostly picking the films? Did you have how did it work? Does the selection, you know, are there levels of selection process? And I think the biggest gripe among filmmakers is, are they actually seeing it all the way through? Or are they just deciding after 15 minutes, this isn't, you know, worthy of the festival?
So, I mean, I'll just jump in for the beginning and then I'll turn it to Thom. But in the first year, we didn't even have a submission platform. We weren't on Without a Box or Film Freeway. It was really just, we went out, we hunted, people sent us stuff, we looked at it. Year 2, I think Thom and I, we were screening all of it. Slowly, we developed a whole programming team, which is quite robust right now, and a pre-screening team. And we had a director of programming for many years, Basil Tsiokos, who left to Sundance last year. And Thom stepped into his role last year to oversee the programming team. But Thom, maybe you can just talk about how the programming and pre-screening all comes together.
Yeah,
and I'll throw into the chat a little snapshot of the team, just if people are interested.
Yeah, I mean, so DOC NYC has definitely evolved its programming as we've grown, and we've reached a stage now where we have 3 features programmers and 2 associate programmers. Our 3 features programmers are Ruth Samalo, Karen McMullen, and Brandon Harrison, and the associate programmers for features are Bidatri Chowdhury and Kim Garcia, and then overseeing shorts for a long time that was Opal Bennett, and last year it was taken over by Sama Ali, who did a fantastic job, and Sama works with 2 associate programmers for shorts. So that was I think it's been a tremendous asset to the festival to have these really talented team of programmers who are drawing upon all kinds of different experiences that they have working at other festivals, and as well as their own life experiences. Going back to your question, Doug, about the concern that filmmakers have over the black box of sending their film off into the submissions process, and what actually happens on the other side. I'll say this: every festival programmer, stays up sleepless at night, worried about missing a great film. And when we, approach what's in our our submissions bin, which is voluminous and overflowing, we're all trying to set up processes that make sure we don't miss that great film. There's nothing that would make any festival programmer cringe more than to know that a film that was submitted to them, they passed on, went on to really shine at some other festival. So that's the effort and mentality that people are bringing to going through their submissions.
You guys have made a real effort to become, your staff is much more diverse than it has been. And I know you make an effort to make sure your programming is more diverse and inclusive. How do you balance that between also having a mission to program the very best films, no matter what? Do you try and have a proportion of your films be from filmmakers of color or from women filmmakers, or are you just picking what you feel are the top films?
I mean, I don't think those are at odds with each other. I think, we always thought about DOC NYC as, trying to be as diverse in its programming as the city that we serve. And, one of the things that I've seen over the years is, how on any given day of DOC NYC, if you're at DOC NYC, on a Saturday at Cinepolis in Chelsea, you could see, the Burmese community turning out for one film, and a Latin American community turning out for another film, and an Irish community turning out for another film, and those communities may only come to one film, and that's fine. I mean, we hope ideally they'll come to one film and then become curious about things that pick up a catalog and become curious about other films. But part of the exciting part of running a festival in New York City, where there is where you can get a community for almost any film. Although I think like we have better track records with some communities than others. We're looking to try to fulfill that as much as possible.
Oh, Raphael, I thought you were about to say
Yeah,
something.
I was going to add something, but it's okay. You can keep going.
By the way, I also want to give a nod to the really great workshops and webinars you do with DOC NYC Pro, and give a special shout out to your Director of Industry and Education, Malika Rollins, who is listening in, but is also one of our great D-Word. Hey, Malika, and one of our great D-Word ambassadors, and spearheading our documentality mental health initiative that everybody will be hearing a lot more of in the near future. So greetings, Malika. So just one or two more festival questions before we move on to the broader industry. Okay, I'm a filmmaker. I've gotten that wonderful email saying I'm in DOC NYC. I don't know whether it's, is it worth the expense? How do I get attention? You've got like 200 films playing there. What's the best way of going about trying to create attention for my film when so many other films are playing? Is it worth getting a publicist? Is that really going to help? And, if the goal is to launch the film and get, distribution for it.
I'll let Thom speak to publicist question, but one thing we've started investing in is making sure that our marketing team gives every single film an individualized social media toolkit. So if you're a filmmaker in a festival and you actually have no idea how to navigate social media or how to even think about promoting your film or engaging audiences, every film gets this already curated with links that you copy, document, a PDF that'll help them. And we also lead a free kind of marketing class for all the filmmakers so that they, beyond our festival, they walk away with tools and equipped to help promote their own film. The publicist question, Thom, I'll let you weigh in because you probably see it from various different festivals and can speak to each of them.
I think once you get into any festival, it's worth having a short dialogue with the festival about what your aims are, and and are there any assets that that you can bring to elevating the film at the festival. Each film has different goals and different strategies. In New York City, there are sometimes films that say, hey, go ahead, can you book me for an interview on WNYC? I'd love to do that. And then there are some films who say, I love playing the festival. I don't want to be booked for an interview on WNYC because I hope my film will come out in 6 months, and I'd like to do my interview on WNYC then, and not have them tell me, oh, we're not going to do it because we did it 6 months ago. So in deciding what whether you're going to invest in a publicist or not, I mean, that's always a risk reward balance, and there are there's a range of ways in which you can work with a publicist. You can do that yourself if you have a good hustle to you and are ready to engage in that work. You could hire a junior publicist that may be less of an investment. But there are many good junior publicists who have a good list and who kind of do the basics for you, or you can hire a top-notch publicist. If you feel like if you've had some kind of conversations with your circle and people who have been through this before, and feel like, you know, feel like your goals align with what you can accomplish with a good publicist. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, so some of the things that you might be looking for, you know, you might be looking for a trade review. If this is your world premiere or North American premiere, if you haven't been reviewed yet in Variety, Hollywood Reporter, IndieWire, you know, those are things that a publicist can, you know, often do. I mean, a good publicist can often do better than you might do on your own. But I should also say, like, you know, it's constantly changing. You know, when we started DOC NYC 12 years ago, you know, we could count every year on getting a curtain raiser piece in the Village Voice. Village Voice doesn't exist anymore. You know, there are many years when we got curtain raiser pieces in Time Out. You know, that does not really have a film editorial department anymore. And so, you know, what you might have been able to do with a publicist, you know, even 7 years ago, you know, some of those, now those opportunities have shifted. You know, I think that I'll get off this tangent in a second, but I do think, you know, the ultimate goal is raising awareness for your film. So a publicist is one pathway to that, but, you know, a social media strategist is a different pathway to that. And often those are, you know, usually in my experience, those are two different sets of skills. And, you know, as the you know, opportunities shrink more to, you know, to get traditional press, and opportunities got to grow more to do social media, I think that's something worth considering.
You know, I got ahead of myself a little bit with that question, because I also wanted to ask something that always comes up on the D-Word. When I've submitted my film to DOC NYC, or really any festival, how is there anything I can do to get it on your radar? I mean, a lot of people feel like you have to go through a sales agent, or you need to, you know somebody who knows you guys to bring it to your attention, and that will help. I, you know, also am aware that, you know, like you said earlier, you love to discover films that, you know, smaller films that you can make into big, you know, discoveries. So is it worth, you know, do we just trust that you guys will handle it and there's nothing we can really do once we submit, or is there in fact anything that we can do?
I think it's always worth to enlist your advocates to spread the word, and in, you know, in a politely persistent way. Look, ultimately, it's you know, it's not going to change a programmer's mind between, you know, showing a film they don't like and to showing it, you know, simply because, you know, some bold-faced name wrote to the programmer. But it, you know, it can help move. It can help speed up the process. It can help, you know, move a film to getting viewed faster and getting the filmmaker feedback faster, even if the feedback is, sorry, we're not going to, we don't have a place for this film. I mean, Jan Rofkamp, who I think was mentioned before, who, you know, was also my sales agent when I was a filmmaker, used to say, no is the second best answer you can receive. And I think that, you know, that's true. And it's, you know, it's why I try to, when I can, give people a no quickly, because, you know, I want to be able to, you know, let them figure out, you know, move on and figure out the next strategy, and not be waiting, you know, for the, you know, the official replies, which, you know, can sometimes, you know, be weeks or months after you've submitted your film.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'd add is yes, you can always a polite check-in. We're all human. If you're wondering, drop a note, make it polite. Don't be a stalker. That's fine, but it won't influence outcome. And Thom, I'm always amazed. He sleeps very well at night. But a lot of his job is saying no, and it crushes us. Like we say no to friends. We say no to people who feel, oh my goodness, I've won all these awards, or I'm an alumni. And even with our expanded lineup, we don't always have slots. So, programmers are pulled in different directions this year, and we try to give our programmers enough autonomy to make their decisions. So I guess, yes, absolutely reach out politely so you feel you've done what you can, but it won't really influence at the end of the day, the outcome.
And listen, I mean, I should say that, even though all festivals are trying to build machines that prevent against missing out on great films. It's you can't build a machine airtight enough to manage such a heavy flow of films in such a short amount of time. So there are it's always worthwhile just making sure that a film has gotten seen, that it's gotten seen by that's gotten all the consideration that it can from a festival, and hasn't somehow slipped through the cracks.
So by way of pivoting a bit, I'm really curious how the pandemic has impacted the festival the past few years, but also film exhibition in general. Well, first and foremost, if you were a filmmaker, would you do a virtual film festival?
I mean, I think this is a constantly changing strategy. I mean, I think in for the last 2 years, when there were a lot of audiences. Well, in 2020, audiences could not come out to theaters, and I mean, I think filmmakers had a choice to make. Well, can I afford to sit on my film for another year or more, or do I want this film to get out in the world? And if I wanted to get this film out in the world, then virtual festivals were really your only option. And in 2020, when we went online, we did something that very few festivals were able to do that year, which is we maintained our same size. We did not shrink. And in 2021, we also maintained our same size, even being able to go back to theaters. And I think that DOC NYC 2021 was the largest in-theater festival to take place in the previous year. I mean, it was bigger than we showed more films in the Toronto Film Festival. We showed more films in the Sundance Film Festival. And that took an enormous amount of effort. And I think that in thinking about 2021, the films that were able to show both in theaters and online, I think overall had overwhelmingly positive experiences doing that. I mean, it's when you're showing a film in a New York City theater, like inevitably there's people that you wish could be experiencing it, somewhere else who can't. I don't personally feel like that there are great downsides to that hybrid experience. I mean, if people have specific questions, I'd be happy to address them. But I mean, there a lot of fears that were arising. I don't think really came to pass. But it's also. It depends on the film. I mean, it's a film-to-film experience about how you make that decision.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I think it's just changing all the time. I think 2021 is different than 2022. I think the first few months of the pandemic felt a lot more nerve-wracking than later on. Fears people had about piracy and online platforms, overall, that hasn't been the case. So it's been safe. And for us, one of the things that's really nice is the pandemic, in a way, forced us outside of our comfort zone as a festival. DOC NYC for 11 or for 10 years had been a festival where you have to be in New York for these 9 days in November or you miss it. And what is it? Necessity is the mother of all invention. You know, suddenly here we have a pandemic, and things we thought maybe one day we'll do in the future, like do panels online, we were forced into. So the nice thing for us with the pandemic is it accelerated our whole new format shift. So for the first time ever, just like you guys right now, like we can have anyone attend Malika's panels online, and which has been lovely as people around the world join in. And for the festival, no longer did you have to be in New York. And we had people from all 50 states and all US territories join, which is super exciting when you look at ticket reports. And we capped the number of tickets sold, so filmmakers didn't have to worry about thresholds beyond their comfort zone. So those things worked really well. And you know, we got fan letters from people in Iowa and random places who basically said, I would have never been able to make it to New York, but thanks for letting me experience these documentaries that have been incredible to watch. So for us, it's been really net positive. And yeah, and I mean, the only other thing I'll add is I run a festival showing other people's films, but very recently I've been a filmmaker. So one of the experiences for me, having been a filmmaker in the last 5 years, is I'm always, as we're running this festival, trying to think, and sometimes we don't get it right, and sometimes we have to do better, but about the filmmaker's experience of all the things we're offering. So in a way, I always try the best I can to wear both hats.
Yeah. I'll add Joe's Violin, an Academy-nominated short.
Yes, that is right. And I think I saw Kahani Cooperman, who directed it somewhere in this,
yes, she is.
Hello, group of people. I think she's out there somewhere.
Yes. So it may have impacted DOC NYC in positive ways, but do you think, you know, the model for theatrical distribution for docs seemed broken even before the pandemic and seems now more broken than ever. Would you agree with that? Do you still see possibilities for the theatrical doc, or is it limited to, you know, a few very high profile films that usually come out of Toronto or Sundance?
Well, listen, theater going in general is not recovered from, you know, it's not returned to its pre-pandemic attendance. That I don't know of any movie theater in the country where that's true. I'm currently talking to you from Detroit, Michigan, where I'm attending the Freep Festival, and last night I was at the local cinema Detroit, very kind of homegrown cinema, the only first run movie screen in Detroit city limits. And you know, and they were talking to me about, you know, about the struggle it's been to get audiences back to theater. And, you know, and I, you know, I see that amongst all theater owners that I talk to. So, you know, I think this summer is going to be you know, a real test of whether people are coming back into movie theaters. You know, whether, I mean, I think some of the challenges there is, I mean, of course, there's the, you know, basic challenge. Some people just, you know, aren't ready to do that. You know, don't feel safe doing it. Another big challenge is that people have adopted different habits in how they entertain themselves. And they've, you know, they've gotten out of certain habits of going out, and are we going to get back to those habits? We don't know. So that's an issue affecting all theatrical exhibition, not just independent documentaries. I mean, Doug, your question about whether theatrical documentary, is broken. I mean, I don't know that there was ever I don't know that there ever was an ideal situation for it. I mean, there's certainly more documentaries that had some access to being shown in theaters in 2019. Then there far more were able to do that than going back to 2005 when I started Stranger Than Fiction. So I think of the opportunities for having your film shown in theater in maybe not in a nationally distributed way, but in some kind of way have been steadily growing. I'm very much a glass half full viewer of that situation. What should you be thinking about in 2022, bringing about a film and trying to maximize your opportunities for showing it to audiences in theaters? I think that the hope of being picked up by a traditional theatrical distributor, whether it's a Magnolia, IFC, Neon, etc. I mean, those continue to be, a small fraction of the films that are playing at festivals. But there are other pathways to, which is probably a whole nother conversation, to getting your film into a theater.
I could go on asking questions. I have so many, but I'll just do a couple more before turning it over to audience questions. I'm curious what are the most positive trends you're seeing in documentary these days, and what are the most depressing trends you're seeing?
I'll take a positive one. And this is obviously with an extreme bias because the first film I made had subtitles, but I love that we have more international documentaries entering mainstream culture. So I feel excited and emboldened by recent films like The Mole Agent or even Flea. Like, I think it's nice to be able to have a more global documentary community engaging with American audiences. Because I know in 2007, that wasn't the case. Americans are scared of subtitles. International things don't always play so well, but I think that's a trend that I've enjoyed. Thom, do you want to add anything you've enjoyed?
I mean, it's a great question, and I feel like the last 2 years I've been in this kind of like month to month survival mode. In 2020, we really felt like we had to reinvent what a film festival could be, moving it online, and in 2021. We had to adapt to a hybrid model, kind of regain our muscle memory of what it meant to put on a festival in person. I mean, I can tell you that there are many upsides to running a festival online. I didn't have to leave my house for one. We didn't have to. Rent physical spaces or manage such a large army of people with so much uncertainty, and coming back in 2021 was kind of reorienting ourselves to all those things again. So I think that we've had our or at least I've had my eyes focused so much on just what's happening next, where the the trends of this pandemic moving, and what does that mean for keeping film festivals alive and thriving, that I haven't. I don't feel like equipped to be in to answer the questions you're asking about, larger trends in documentary film.
Oh. There was a question in the chat that I think it's worth taking a second on, which was around accessibility. And I think for me personally, COVID and doing things online has been a master class in learning best practices around accessibility, things we hadn't talked about, and different ways we can make content more accessible to broader people. So we collect closed captions for all of our films. And somebody was asking specifically about audio descriptions. And I think when those are available from filmmakers, we can include those. And you have somebody signing this conversation. That's something as well. Like when we do online events, people can request whatever accommodations they need. So for us, we were probably woefully behind pre-COVID because we hadn't done many of these things. But in the last 2 years, I think that's a very positive trend, not unique to us, but unique to many festivals who are thinking through similar topics.
I'll say something else I think is a positive trend, and D-Word is a real forerunner in this, and in bringing together a community of documentary filmmakers to share knowledge and to think about advocacy, and I think in the last 5 years we've seen a lot more organizations emerge, whether it's Brown Girls Doc Mafia or ADOCs or the Documentary Producers Alliance. And more and more Undocumented Filmmakers Collective and so on. I think this has been a real positive development in people being able to draw strength from each other, to be able to learn from each other, be able to advocate with as a larger group.
Yeah. I'd add Dear Producer, which is another great, online resource and community. Okay, last question for me. Since you wouldn't go near depressing trends, what about, the impact of streamers being like the primary funders these days of documentary? Do you think it's impacted both the aesthetic and the subject matter of documentaries, this need to make it look like a fiction film, have dolly shot interviews with multiple cameras and drones and, big time production values and, the emphasis on celebrity film documentaries and big social issue films and of course, true crime. Is there room for kind of the small handheld character-driven film, documentary anymore in this landscape?
Listen, I think there are positive and negative forces to that. I think the small personal documentary, was always a top sell, and now it's a top sell against different kinds of forces. 10 years ago, there weren't all these streamers. So, it wasn't like you were being shut out by those streamers because they didn't exist. So you couldn't, your choices were between many fewer outlets to get your film out in the world. In terms of, the aesthetic influences that come with, an intense commercialization. I think back 20 years ago when, reality TV was that force, where, if you were a documentary filmmaker who was trying to make a living, I know a lot of people in the late 90s, early aughts who kind of realized the skill set they had, that the best paying outlet for it would be to go work on a reality TV show. And, and some people did that, holding their nose and earning a paycheck and while keeping their projects of passion going on the side. So now we have, these different commercial influences and if I never saw another true crime documentary again, I think I'd be perfectly fine. But I think the overwhelmingly positive thing about the force of streamers is that it's undeniably, growing the audience for documentaries in general. I mean, the site that we're on right now is called the D-Word. The very premise of it was that documentary was a taboo word that people wanted to run away from because it was considered boring, uncommercial. You couldn't make money from it. Now when you get on an airplane, like, there's a category of documentary being offered to you, alongside drama and comedy. That's a clear indication that documentary has been elevated in the minds of audiences. They're hooked on that as a genre. I think the streamers did a lot to achieve that, and I think we can all stand to benefit from that.